Wow, happy Friday, everybody. It's taken us a long time to get here. Some of us days, some of us weeks, some of us years. For our ancestors, centuries. Um, in your room, in your space, clap it up for yourselves. Give yourselves the vibrations that you need for you to be applauded, for you to be celebrated, and for you to be elevated for this day. My name is Rashawn Williams. I am the co-chair of Ncobra's Philadelphia chapter, and I am also one of your hosts for this 3-day weekend. I'm welcoming you all to this wonderful 3-day convention and conference where we speak to reparations in the United States of America, presented to you both by the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. This is our 32nd annual national convention. Today's theme is reparations now, more than a check. So just so that you know, Ncobra is the premier-based mass, what's a little feedback. So if you all can, please mute yourselves. Ncobra is the premier mass-based coalition of organizations and individuals working together in an organized fashion for the sole purpose of obtaining reparations for African descendants in the United States. So please be ready to be engaged. We have an interactive experience for you all during this 3-day event. So if you have information to share, we have a Q&A section in the Zoom feature for you to ask questions, for you to contribute to the conversation. We have a series of different breakout rooms and interactive polls that we would love for you to be engaged in. And we really do want to hear from you. All we want to do during this conference is make sure that our voices are heard, your voices are heard, and we can become a choir in this work. We also want you to know that this entire conference is being recorded and will be available to you on YouTube. So you can check us out there as well. So thank you for all of those who have come before us, who are here today, making it possible. Let's keep our ancestors in our memory, in our hands, and in our work. And we shall begin with an opening prayer and libation, starting with Chief Penny Gamble.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I was visible. Now I'm not.
Hey, technology has its own way of doing its own thing sometimes.
Well, even though you can't see me, I have some cedar sage and tobacco that I'm burning and bringing forth the smoke for the prayer. And I'll do the prayer in the Wampanoag language. Okay. Ketanet, Numakani Wiptamog, Aki, Numakani Wiptamog, Okamas, Nupashat, Numakni Wiptamog. Wuta chi kiriasum the powers, Numakni Wiptamog Tabat Nuayan, Numakni Wiptamog E Nushikaki, Wampanayo, Sawanayu, Patanayu, Nanamayu. And what I said was this: Great Spirit, I offer this tobacco. Aki, Mother Earth, I offer this tobacco. Grandmother Moon, I offer this tobacco. Grandfather Sun, I offer this tobacco. I offer this tobacco to the 4 directions, to the east, to the south, to the west, to the north. With that, I say Kutabatash, thank you. And my words today are this. Well, I want to let you know that I am known as Chappaquiddick Woman. I am the spiritual elder of the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation of Massachusetts, and I'm the former Sunk Squaw or chief. So as we gather today in this imaginary circle here on Zoom for this important Ncobra 2021 convention, it is important to bring forth the sacred elements of Aki, our Mother Earth, and acknowledging not only Mother Earth, who gives us everything, but the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the fire that's within us to keep us moving. This is the power of life. So we are the children of this earth, and our lives depend on this sacred mother that we walk on. So with all of the different things that are happening with us during these times, it's important for us to stand strong. We have a word, Ayotash means to stand strong. We have a lot to accomplish. And with the power of our ancestors and the power of the fire that is within us, the struggles will continue, but they will continue with that power that we have within us, the red power, the black power, to achieve our goals. For the ancestors whose work was not completed, that's what we do now. And we do it for the 7 generations to come. And with that, I say, Kitabatash, thank you for letting me speak. Aho.
Thank you for speaking for us. Greatly appreciate it. And in honor of spiritual unity and harmony, we would like to introduce our next speaker to provide us with a prayer and opening, a welcoming. And I would invite Brother Onaje to come to speak before us. And if not Brother Onaje, then Reverend JoAnn Watson to provide us with Christian prayer.
O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. We thank you for making us in your image, in your likeness. We thank you for your grace and your mercy. We thank you for your love and your sweet, sweet spirit. We acknowledge you in all your ways and ask that you bless our proceedings this day. We know that you are God and you reside as the power within us, that power that gives us divine instructions from the African Messiah, the African Holy Spirit, and our Father, Mother God, who is, has always been, and will always be. Lord, we are claiming the reparations that are due to us this day. We claim it in your name and for your sake. We claim our reparations in honor of our ancestors, hallelujah, in honor of our children yet born. We claim it because just as you are 3-dimensional, so are we. Mind, body, spirit. The wholeness of us claims it because our people who are your first people, those people that you first declared were your people in our motherland where all life began. You declared that you took us from the earth. There is only one group of people in the universe who looks like they were taken from the earth, and that's us, Lord. We thank you for making us first. We recognize that we are the mothers and fathers of antiquity, of the universe. We are the ones you've been waiting for to rise up and take control. We lay claim to the reparations that are due, overdue, on behalf of this generation, generations past, and generations to come. We do that, Lord, and we recognize the power that is within us. We have power within that comes straight from you. Hallelujah. We don't send prayers up only to the sky. We know that God is within us. Hallelujah. And we are divinely made, divinely created, and we have divine dimensions. Lord, we lay claim to our divine dimensions on this day. We own the power that you have already granted us on this day. And we say, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for bringing us, communing us together for this Ncobra convention. And we promise to give you all the praise as you alone are worthy to be praised. Ashe, so it is, and amen.
Ashe, so it is, and amen. Thank you so very much. Now we would like to have our libation from Dr. Akinyele Umoja.
We want to first salute the Creator in heaven and all of our ancestors who sit at the feet of the Creator in the lifetime which is to come. Ashe.
Ashe.
And my elder always taught me that those of us here in North America should salute the spirits and the ancestors of the indigenous people. Ashe. We say, we salute all of our ancestors who died during the Ma'afa, whether they died at sea, if they died on the coast or here in North America. We say Ashe to those ancestors. And we salute the ancestors whose names we don't remember. Ashe. Oh, ancestors,
Ashe.
blacker than the skies at midnight and brighter than the noonday sun, and all the beautiful shades of Africa in between. Great ancient priests, warriors, and mystic scientists, field slaves, house slaves, domestic workers, factory workers, freedom fighters.
Ashe.
Give us inspiration to fight 1,000 lions.
Ashe.
Give us the enlightenment to unravel the mysteries of the universe.
Ashe.
And give us the sustenance to travel through the trackless swamps of disharmony.
Ashe.
We honor always your name, and we ask you to join us on this day of deliberation. Ashe.
Ashe.
At this time, we're here on the 32nd anniversary of Ncobra, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations. So we want to honor our ancestors who fought for reparations. And if you know some of those names, put them in the chat. First, we salute Belinda, who in 1783 appealed and won compensation for her labor after she's released from enslavement. Ashe. We
Ashe.
salute the great Callie House,
Ashe.
organize our people to get compensation for our enslavement, for our unpaid labor. Ashe. We salute the great Queen Mother Moore. Ashe. We salute Queen Mother Dorothy Benton Lewis. We salute Queen Mother Ijiri Albani. Ashe. We want to salute some of the brothers, the male ancestors like Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, Omowale Malik Shabazz, who fought for reparations for our people. We salute Baba Hannibal Afrique. We salute Baba Imario Badeli. Ashe. We salute Baba Shokwe Lumumba, Baba Conrad Worrell. We salute Reparations Ray Jenkins. Ashe. We salute John Conyers. Ashe. And we salute all of the names of all these ancestors. We salute the ancestors of everyone who's on this call today and all the supporters of this movement who aren't on the call. All of their ancestors. Without their ancestors, they would not be here today. Ashe.
Ashe.
We salute the generations yet unborn because we know this is a cycle and each generation has its mission and they must fulfill it or betray it. Ashe. And finally, even though they're not in spirit world, we recognize there are those who are not here. And I was taught libations for brothers and sisters on the street in the first place. And they said, recognize those who are not here. So we salute our political prisoners, Ashe. We salute our prisoners of war. We salute those who are in exile like Mama Sada Shakur. And so we ask everyone to complete this cycle. We ask the ancestors to be present during our deliberations. We ask the ancestors to help push this reparations movement forward. Ashe.
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 Oh.
Ashe.
Shayo. Okay. Just want to thank everyone thus far for bringing the energy into the space, allowing us to remember who we are, allowing us to remember where we're going, allowing us to be as we need to be. So many things to do during this 3-day weekend. This is a 365-day event in the true spirit of the work that we need to do. And let us be reminded that during these 3 days, we'll do our best to talk about the things that we've been doing and the things that we need to do so that we can be prepared for another time, another gathering in the future where we may share, where we may discuss, where we may build. At this very moment, we would like to lift every voice and sing in transition to a video that will be shared before us all so that we can be in unison. Sometimes you just gotta let it breathe.
Ashe.
Ashe. I'm so happy to see everybody's beautiful faces and beautiful smiles. Like I said, we have a lot to get to and a lot to get through. So without further ado, we have Baba Akinyele Umoja, Judge Mathis, and Sister Adjoa here to speak to us about the history of reparations, the history of Ncobra, a series of things. We have a slight change in the schedule. Our sister Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee will speak to us about some legislative processes with reparations through HR 40 and more. In the words of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, a people without the knowledge of the past, origin, and culture are like a tree without roots, and we cannot be trees that are unrooted, not in this work. But that being said, I would love to turn it over to our brother Umoja, and right after him, hopefully Judge Mathis is here on time. We know that everyone's schedule is busy, and we could transition right into Sister Adjoa and get with the rest of our proceedings. So, Brother Umoja, take it away.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Let me, if I can, I'd like to share my screen if it's possible. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Thanks. And I had the honor of doing the libation, and that kind of moved me in a way, particularly coming after my good sister, Reverend JoAnn Watson. I'm always inspired to be in her presence, and her prayer just really lifted me up and got me into space. But I'd like to say to my brothers and sisters here, I'm honored to be at this 32nd annual National Convention of Ncobra. Much blessings and salute to my sister, Mama Mashariki Jawanza, and Brother Cam Howard, who guide this organization, who do the hard labor. And I just want to say, I'm to speak to you today about the history of the reparations movement, and I'm honored to do so. I have the blessing of having the space to teach a class the last 2 years on the case for reparations for our people here in the United States. And much of this curriculum was based upon a resource guide on reparations that was developed by a team led by Adjoa Aiyetoro, one of the founders of Ncobra. And I was blessed to be on that team. And so I used a lot of that curriculum for the development of this class. But the great thing for me was not only did I teach, but I learned through the process. And one of the ways we learn is having an all-star lineup of folk from our reparations movement who came in virtually for the most part and spoke to the class. People like Jamoke Ife Tayo, veteran leader of Ncobra, Baba Cam Howard, Dr. Conrad Royale. We were blessed to hear from him before he made transition to the ancestors. My brilliant sister, Nkechi Taifa, Dr. Joyce King, who's a member of the National African American Reparations Commission, Ward Churchill from the American Indian struggle, Natsu Saito, who was a law professor at Georgia State, who focuses on international human rights law. Robin Ruth Simmons came in both years and talked to our class. Attorney Roger Wareham came in and he talked to my students about the whole movement toward Durban and the whole thing to get the transatlantic slave trade named as a crime against humanity. Sister Jewel Crawford, who went with the Durban 400 that year, and also Mama Adjoa came and spoke to us, and now I will be blessed to hear from her this morning. So one of the things the students learned was our reparations fight is centuries long. You know, it's not a new thing. It didn't just pop up. And one of the things I always start when we talk about our history in this country, of course, we start in Africa, but when we look at this country, this in the United States, in the continental United States, lot of times our historians miss that the first Africans who were brought to the continental United States as a result of the Ma'afa were brought by the Spanish in 1526. One of the reasons that's not focused on is within months, Africans aligned themselves with the indigenous people and drove the Spanish off the land. This was located in what is now Georgia, in McIntosh County, Georgia. And that's 1526, that's before 1619. And so we got to begin our reparations fight, or our history of our reparations fight then. They took their reparations, right? They took their freedom and they got their recovery during that time. Of course, as I mentioned, during the libation in 1782, an emancipated African woman who, was emancipated, given her freedom in 1782, petitioned the Massachusetts legislature for compensation for her unpaid labor. And Belinda was able to win her petition and was compensated for her labor. She's called Belinda Royale. Then, of course, this building right here should be a sacred place for us. This is a building in 1865 where 20 African leaders, most of them clergy, like my good sister JoAnn Watson, they met with Union General Edwin Stanton and in Savannah, Georgia, and they offered their support to the Union military in turn to get land where they could live and form communities themselves. From this, we have the Sherman Field Order number 15 that said this shaded area here, the land on the coast of Georgia and South Carolina going into North Florida can be given to our people in 40-acre plots. And you didn't have to be enslaved in that particular territory. All you had to do was to be a descendant, African or descendant of an enslaved African to be in that territory. They also specifically said that if you fought in the Union Army, you'd be compensated. So this demand for 40 acres and a mule became very popular amongst our people. The 186,000, I should note, Black men, and then the other 200,000 who supported the military effort of the Union Army. That demand for 40 acres and a mule became very popular. And we must point out, as W.B. Du Bois said, that they are our liberators, not Abraham Lincoln. They're the folks who fought and bled for freedom, including our ancestors who escaped from the plantation, as Du Bois talked about, who had the great general strike that crippled the Confederate economy. But let's go back. So this 40 acres and a mule becomes a popular demand of our people during that time. Great Mother Sojourner Truth, she's often not connected to reparations, but in 1870, she demanded from the United States government land grants, that the federal government financed grants of land to African people coming out of our enslavement. Generally, we only associate her with fighting to get emancipated, number one, and for women's rights, which are valuable struggles, but she also, what must be included in her narrative and in her history, is she demanded land from the federal government and even met with presidents about this demand for land to go as compensation to emancipated African people at that time. We have here Bishop Henry Mcneill Turner of the AME Church. Bishop Turner called for repatriation of African people to the West Coast of Africa. He demanded the United States pay for it and also compensate those Africans who decided to return. Repatriation has always been a demand of reparations activists. Of course, the great Callie House and Isaiah Montgomery formed the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Society to win reparations for survivors of enslavement. The movement grew to 300,000, but was what? Targeted by the United States government, and both House and Montgomery were imprisoned in 1918. It must be pointed out as that Callie House organization provided the basis really and was organized in the same place that the UNIA would grow in the South. So she sets the network and the foundation for that organization. In 1899, you had the lynching, the brutal lynching of Sam Hose in Noonan, Georgia. And after this lynching in 1899, a pastor, Lucius Hosey, a pastor of the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, demanded from the United States and had to call for a territory to be established in Oklahoma or in New Mexico for African people so we can live and have full potential in our lives. A call for freeing the land even before Baba and Mario Obadeli makes that call. Of course, we had the great Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore, and of course, she has a history long before this, but in 1957, she formed the Universal Association of Ethiopian Women that fought for to call out legal lynching of Black men during that time, but it builds the foundation of the reparations movement. And this is an organization of women. If you notice in the history of our reparations movement, women, our sisters, our mothers, they play a major role in this fight for reparation. Queen Mother Moore in 1963 presented to the United Nations a petition with 1 million signatures demanding reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans in this country. We'll talk about her further. Of course, if you're familiar with Oyatunji village or the Yoruba movement, those you say Alafia, the founder of that movement in the United States, Nana Surgeman Adafume, the Oba of Oyatunji village, formed in the 60s with Queen Mother Moore, the New Elijah Party and the African Descendants National Independence Partition Party, which demanded the land in the South as reparations for African people. The Nation of Islam, in its Muhammad Speaks call for reparations for Black people, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. And I will say, the narrative I have from my oral history as the Queen Mother Moore helped influence this decision by the organization. But what does this say? We want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of their own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to provide such land and that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. You know, don't put us off in the desert somewhere, right? We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we're able to produce and supply our own needs. And this was the reparations demand of the Nation of Islam and still is today. Of course, in 1966, you had the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And in this program, point number 3 is we believe the racist government has robbed us and we are demanding an overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. But of course, Malcolm X, prior to the Black Panther Party, called for the United States to be exposed for genocide during that time. And he would inspire other reparations activists, including the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Right after him, Martin Luther King in the Poor People's Campaign. And this, of course, this is forgotten about King. This is not brought up on January 15th, right? This is not brought up when we celebrate the King holiday. It's only I Have a Dream. But during the Poor People's Campaign on the eve of his death, Martin Luther King called for reparations, again, pointing to those, the land was given to white settlers to move out west when land was taken from the indigenous people, but we didn't receive our 40 acres and a mule. And so during the Poor People's Campaign, which was supposed to lead, which did lead to Washington, D.C. to protest, King said, when we come to Washington, we're coming to get our check. And he meant our reparations during that time. So Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are both supporters of this reparations movement. Of course, one of the clearest expressions of reparations was the forming of the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa formed in 1968 in the holy city of Detroit, Reverend Watson. And in that place, we see these key figures of that movement who saw themselves following in the tradition of Malcolm. Of course, we see Baba Mari Obadele and his beautiful white dashiki, the great Queen Mother Moore, who came up with the name New Africa. We see this attorney, JoAnn Joan Franklin, I should say, excuse me. And she's the one who came up with this whole concept that we were paper citizens, that we never were given a right to choose whether we wanted to go back to Africa, whether we wanted to become citizens of the United States, or if we wanted to form our separate territory. Through that, she says we were denied our right to self-determination. Of course, Betty Shabazz is the widow of Malcolm X is in the background. And here we see the founding president of the Republic of New Africa, the great Robert Williams, and his wife, Mabel Williams, who are both ancestors now. They called for 5 states to be given to our people to form a nation, an independent territory, as well as they had an anti-depression program that they were taking in 1972 to the government to receive reparations for our people. Again, you had in 1969, you had the Black Manifesto Conference, Black Manifesto coming out of the National Black Economic Development Conference, which would eventually demand 500 million in reparations to our people. And they came up with a creative plan of civil disobedience to get that reparation. They targeted white churches, predominantly white denominations in the United States, in synagogues. And here you see James Farman going before the Riverside Church in New York, disrupted service. He took over service. And that scared the bejesus out of a lot of white folks in the United States, that Black people were going to come and take over their services. And many white denominations did establish programs, reparatory justice programs, that some are still in existence today, but it's still not far enough, and we need to go further. Here's James Foreman speaking again from the Riverside Church. Of course, in 1972, at the National Black Political Convention, Jesse Jackson, Amiri Baraka, Richard Hatcher, Charles Diggs, and others formed the Black Agenda. And the Black Agenda that came from that conference, this Black Power Conference, if you will, said we must not rest until American society has recognized our valid historic right to reparations. And we must establish a Black National Commission, to determine a procedure for reparation schedule in terms of land, capital, and cash. And that's hopefully what we're talking about with HR 40, right? The great Queen Mother Benton Lewis, Dorothy Benton Lewis, establishes the Black Reparations Commission with Pan-Africanist Irvin Davis, and that would be a foundational organization for Ncobra. Of course, in 1987, Adjoa Aiyetoro would organize a panel with the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the legal arm of the Black Liberation Movement. And then they, at that panel, which speakers like Richard America, economist, Nkechi Taifa, activist, lawyer, scholar, just hard worker, artist, all those things, Baba Chokwe Lumumba and Baba Imari Obadele, they had a reparations session, and this conference was held right after legislation was passed that gave compensation to Japanese Americans for their internment during World War II. It was also on the 100th anniversary of the United States Constitution. And at that conference, the papers presented by Nkechi Taifa, Mario Badeli, and Chokwe Lumumba became the basis of reparations, yes, but also motivated, particularly with the organizing of Dorothy Benton Lewis, the Ncobra conference that was founded in 1987, and we're on the 32nd year of this conference, right? And here you see the founders, the principal founders, Adjoa, Aiyetoro, Imaro Badeli, Shokwe Lumumba, New African People's Organization, one of my big brothers. And so this conference occurred and it became the basis of this movement. Of course, one of the members of the organization, Reparations, Ray Jenkins, is one who lobbied John Conyers, and this is what promoted or developed this HR 40 bill was first introduced in 1989, 2 years after the founding of Ncobra. Let me say this. Ncobra, as Sister Adjoa and Sister Akishi pointed out to my class, they recognized that reparations was primarily supported through Black nationalists and Black radicals, and we needed to broaden the agenda. So one of the objectives of this organization was to broaden the conversation around the question of reparations and make sure that it covered and created a big tent for people within our community to join in and be a part of this conversation and this demand. Of course, one of the things that helped the conversation was the book The Debt by Randall Robinson, January 2000. In that year, it must be noted, and a lot of us forget that the Democratic Party had its platform support for reparations, for supporting a reparations commission. We could talk about that later. What was their motivation for doing that? And there's similar motivations later, similar actions later. But it shows the effect of broadening conversation that the Democratic Party would do that at that time. We could talk about that. Of course, around the same time, Attorney Roger Wareham of the December 12th movement, who was doing work in the international human rights organizations, advocated and won the decision or the decision to move for a world conference against racism. And of course, at that conference, this whole question of the transatlantic slave trade being a crime against humanity was put on the table. And so it motivated not only Africans, descendants in the United States, but around the Western Hemisphere, on the African continent, even in Europe, to have this conversation and come to the conference. Here we see Baba Conrad Royal, who led the National Black United Front, as well as my sister Viola Plummer of the December 12th movement, who organized the Durban 400, and then several other organizations Ncobra and several other organizations mobilized people to Durban in 2001 and won the international community adopting that the transatlantic slave trade, the Ma'afa, I would call it, was a crime against humanity. Unfortunately, after that happened, we have 9/11, and in the United States, the dialogue changed. International community, the dialogue changed to fighting against international terrorism from the momentum that had been built around charging the United States, not charging, but charging European powers with responsibility for crime against humanity. Of course, we had the Global African Congress that would come after that. Unfortunately, it was kind of disrupted. The momentum of that conference was disrupted by infiltration, as well as unclarity of ourselves in terms of how to move. And we could talk about that in more depth later. We had reparations lawsuits. Deidre Farman Palmer, who sued Fleet Boston and Aetna during that time. And she won some significant victories in terms of getting an unprecedented public apology from Aetna. She also became a basis for other litigation suits and presented some challenges to doing litigation suits around this whole question of challenging corporations with responsibility for our enslavement and oppression. You had the momentum around Tulsa, 1921, and the massacre that occurred on our people there. And of course, Charles Ogletree filed suit along with Johnny Cochran, and they filed suit in court, even though the Supreme Court refused to recognize this suit and hear it. Also in 2001, you had the Millions for Reparations, organized again by the National Black United Front and December 12th movement. And we rallied over 100,000 people rallied in Washington, D.C., demanding reparations, probably the largest mass reparations rally to this point. I think we're going to do better in the future. Okay. 15 Caribbean governments agreed on reparations in 2014, and that and to charge the British Empire, the British Commonwealth, and then that motivated action in the United States. Here we see historian V.P. Franklin, who challenged the academic community with his 10-point program for reparation, and he called for a reparations super fund. And he challenged other academic organizations to do so. He was at that time the editor for the Journal of African American History. From that, you also had the National African American Reparations Commission formed, NARC. And around the same time, the author Ta-Nehisi Coates presented his case for reparations, which again motivated more conversation and action. Like Georgetown students challenging Georgetown around its responsibility of the enslavement of Africans. Georgetown founded by the sale of 246 enslaved Africans. Harvard was challenged for its how it benefited from the sale of these images of enslaved Africans without compensation to their descendants. You also have the founding of the American Descendants of Slavery, which has been a controversial organization, oftentimes considered divisive, but we must give them credit for promoting conversation amongst a new generation of young people around this whole question of reparations. The hearing finally in 2020, we have the hearing on HR 40 in the United States Congress with Danny Glover and Ta-Nehisi Coates and others on this panel. Some people opposing reparations, but that was a preceded. Before I go on there, I also point out other thing that happened in 2019 going into 20 was our sister Robin Rue Simmons, who led the campaign in Evanston, Illinois, to get the reparations fund created there for Black homeowners, for Black residents of Evanston, Illinois, and kind of pioneering the way on local reparations efforts. And same year, my colleague, my friend, my mentor, Shirley Weber, former African-American studies professor, but now Speaker of the House in California. But Shirley Weber led the campaign to have California introduce legislation similar to HR 40 to form a commission that studies and develops reparations proposals. And then he created this reparations conversation that we saw during the 2020 presidential primary season, where several Democratic candidates supported HR 40. So the conversation has expanded. We saw in this year, in 2021, Sheila Jackson Lee leading the effort to get HR 40 finally out of committee, finally advancing what was proposed by Reparations Ray Jenkins and shepherded by John Conyers. Finally, in 2021, it made it out of committee. Very partisan vote, 25 for, 17 against. But it's made it this far from a significant struggle. One of the things, and I listened to the hearing, one of the things I learned was what Ncobra sought to do in 1987, in terms of broadening the conversation, in terms of broadening the advocates. Because I heard liberal Democrats, some of them white Democrats, advancing the cause of reparations and presenting very cogent arguments, which previously you would only hear from Black nationalists or Black revolutionaries. So Ncobra has done its job, but there's still much more work to do. We saw a couple of weeks ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, again, the attention of the nation on Tulsa in 1921. In a way, we've never heard it. These elders, these survivors of Tulsa being honored and recognized, but at the same time, people in the street demanding reparations. People being active, demanding reparations. And we gotta remember that, you know, some people said segregation was gonna last forever. But it took a clear movement, fighting on several different levels all across the country, with young folks involved, with churches involved. This movement dismantled segregation, just as we had a movement and action from our people dismantled the Confederacy and dismantled enslavement, except for punishment of a crime, 13th Amendment. So with that, I just want to thank you all for listening. Remember, this struggle for reparations is something that's going centuries long. I also want to acknowledge some of the sources I use: Ray Winbush's Should America Pay, Chokwe Lumumba, Akishi Taifa and Baba Amari's Reparations Yes, The Debt, Mary Frances Berry's My Face is Black is True about Callie House, the reparations chronology done by Baba Conrad Worrell and Ray Winbush, and Kishi Taifa's Black Power, Black Lawyer. And finally, Adjoa Aiyetoro's article, Historic and Modern Social Movements for Reparations, Ncobra and its Antecedents. And there's many more. If you email me or something, we could send you some of these resources. We got to study and we got to be able to convince more people about this whole reparations piece, but then we got to be active and willing to take it to the next level. Thank you again for having me. Free the land, reparations now. Ashe.
We've been rooted, we've been grounded, we've been settled, we've been anchored into the space. We've gotten a beautiful history of reparations. And before we get into the history of Ncobra, after speaking about so many of our leaders, we would like to introduce the leaders of this movement, of this organization, of this coalition, our brother Cam and our sister and queen mother, Mashariki.
Yeah, I want to just start off by thanking those who gave blessings and prayer and a powerful libation, and also the drum call that led us in opening up our convention. And it's my duty at this time to just welcome all of the attendees to the convention, to our 32nd annual Ncobra convention. And it is my hope that our primary takeaway from this 32nd convention is that we, all Ncobra members, must assert our leadership in the movement. When we look at the discourse nationally, many voiceless, some prominent, some not so prominent, have joined the movement. Some are importantly adding positively to the movement and to the mission, and others not so. But I would like everyone to know here at this convention that Ncobra is second to none in the movement. We are second to none in longevity. We've been here over 34 years. We're second to none in consistency. We have never wavered. We're second to none in accuracy of position. We pushed forward the 5 energy areas over 20 years ago, and they are still relevant today. And since 2014, we have championed full reparations, the highest standard of reparations at this time globally. This was written into HR 40 and Ncobra's direction, and through our leadership, this has become the shared demand by many forces now in the movement, forces like the National African Reparations Commission, NARC, the Human Rights Watch, and Movement for Black Lives. And we are second to none in activism. We have been on the front line of every major reparations action in this country since our founding in 1987. So again, we are second to none in longevity, second to none in consistency, second to none in accuracy and position and activism. The planners of this convention have put together 3 full days of dynamic programming. We must leave this convention motivated to build the base larger, to push forward HR 40 and more local reparations over the finish line. All of us must up our study and up our activism. I again welcome you, and I ask you to please do not blink anytime during this convention, because you will miss something. Thank you and welcome to this convention.
Well, greetings, Abaigani, Karibu, welcome. We are getting off to a wonderful start. I really appreciate our spiritual opening. It was important to us that a Native American lead us in this opening. We understand this is their land, and we ask permission to do what we do. We support their movements as well. Baba Akinyele, you've laid it out. We're looking forward to our other histories and our other speakers. So I encourage you to sit back, listen, learn, and confirm. I invite you to take notes and share and connect with others. It is very important. The reparations movement is very similar to the civil rights movement of the past. Every Black person should be a part of this, and we encourage you to do so. I'd like to leave you with the words of Queen Mother Moore: don't weary and don't err. So let's be correct. Let's take this knowledge. Let's move forward with it. Let's share it. And let it inspire us to do this work. It is not my job, Brother Cam's job, and the board of Ncobra's job just to do this work. This is our work. And the work that we do is for our people. And so we need our people to step up, brothers and sisters. Only through unity are we going to survive. Our ancestors have brought us this far. So let's take this and move forward. Let's survive. The chief talked about 7 generations. Our Baba Hannibal told us this work that we are doing is not for us. It is for 7 generations ahead. So I encourage you for this weekend. I know it's long, but I'm telling you, as Brother Cam said, don't blink. You don't want to miss anything. So again, welcome. And Asante Sana for taking the time to be here. You could be any place else today, but you are here with us, and we are very thankful for that. Asante Sana.
Judge Mathis.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to Ncobra, to my dear sister, Masharika, Queen Mother, to Brother Cam, Howard. I thank you all for all the work and the leadership you all have provided. I thank you all for being viewers and keeping me on television for 23 years, the longest running Black man in television history. And I am forever grateful to the city of Detroit, its voters, its activists who raised me, who trained me, beginning with Councilman Cleveland in Detroit, Congressman Conyers in Detroit, Mayor Coleman Young in Detroit, and of course, Reverend JoAnn Watson. Everybody in Detroit works for her. And so I thank God for the training I received. And I speak of the show because it was mentioned short time as part of the introduction. I usually don't talk much about the show because when I get off the bench, I'm primarily a freedom fighter who takes that robe off and goes into the trenches for our people. But I must say my strategy over these 23 years has been to take the knowledge, the wisdom that I've received, not only from Detroiters, but in Chicago. Many of you know I was mentored by Reverend Jackson and listened and accepted the wisdom of our brother minister from the nation. And I've been prepared. And so I've tried to use that preparation on television to infuse social commentary alongside entertainment, because unfortunately, we can't get the eyeballs or the ears of many of our people, perhaps most of our people who watch television and film without it being entertaining. We have a saying in television that you can't give the people what you want them to have. You have to give them what they want. Otherwise, they won't watch. And so I try and give them what I want. What they want. And then I try and give them what Ncobra wants and what NAACP wants, what the National Action Network wants, what Rainbow Push wants, what the Congressional Black Caucus wants, all the things that advance the cause of our people, I try and infuse in my delivery of justice and in my entertaining way. So I thank you all for keeping me in that position to fight the battle on behalf of our people. I want to acknowledge quickly as well and give a moment of silence because today we intend to achieve, or today we're achieving a small measure of justice and accountability in the sentencing of the killer of George Floyd. And so that sentencing is indeed just a small measure of justice and accountability. You know, I want to, as I said, start by giving honor to the men and women who sacrificed their lives as martyrs in the struggle for equal justice under the law. You know, the 2020 killing of George Floyd was a culmination of centuries of torture and lynching and killings by law enforcement of Black men and specifically, but Black people in general. And so this culmination of those atrocities have given us a sense of and measure of how justice, equal justice under the law can really be applied in this country. But beyond that, the names of those whom have sacrificed in the times, Trayvon Martin, February 26, 2012, perhaps launching the movement, modern day movement that we culminate today. Eric Garner, July 17th, 2014. Michael Brown, October 9, 2014. Tamir Rice, November 22nd, 2014. Walter Scott, April 4th, 2015. Alton Sterling, July 5th, 2016. Castile Philando, July 6, 2016. Stephon Clark, March 18, 2018. March 13, 2020, Breonna Taylor. All of these, and indeed the Emmett Till of our time, George Floyd, those martyrs have led to a new movement and a new push for justice. But as in past movements, what we see are promises from America, its leading institutions, and its corporations. Once again, in fact, this is the third set of promises for economic justice and economic empowerment and the initiatives to eliminate poverty among our people. This is the third time. In fact, the first time, as we all know, it was the abolition of slavery. It was the abolition of slavery, and subsequent to that, millions of dollars, trillions and billions in today's dollars, no doubt, were dedicated to the freedom and reestablishment, or the establishment we were never established, the establishment of post-slavery institutions and assistance. We were promised 40 acres in the mule, U.S. Congress. We were given the Freedmen's Bureau. We were allowed equal, or not quite equal access to the ballot box, but initial access to the ballot box, which resulted in empowering many Black elected officials throughout the country. But of course, we know that story. Reconstruction was destroyed and its assets taken back, and the benefits of that commitment and those promises taken back. Then we had the modern day civil rights movement, launched by Emmett Till in many ways. In fact, Rosa Parks, who we attribute the launch, and I refer to her as the preeminent leader of our women's movement alongside all of the other dear sisters, Queen Mother Moore being there as well. But I would attribute that, and she attributes her inspiration to the time she attended Emmett Till's funeral. Indeed, she left Emmett Till's funeral and later joined the Montgomery Association, resulting in the Montgomery boycott, and attributing the leadership to the Dr. King and the other leaders of the Montgomery Association. And so it is that immediately after that, and of course, we know the years of fight, struggle, and protest from organizations such as the Black nationalist groups, Black Panthers, the civil rights organizations, etc. Well, that culminated in the inflaming of many cities around the country's uprisings, as we've seen in our recent movement. Those uprisings resulted in a Kerner Commission. Indeed, the Kerner Commission was established to address the uprisings that began with police shootings in most cases. And so once again, we received the Kerner Commission. We received affirmative action. We received commitments to anti-poverty programs. Well, those commitments that were met were short-lived. Affirmative action was taken back in less than a decade. The anti-poverty programs went away as President Johnson left office. And so once again now, in our current movement, sparked once again by police killing and uprisings, brought about another commitment of billions of dollars of America's corporate and political institutions. We find, indeed, there's been over $5 billion in financial commitment from corporate America, even though within that year, we've only received 250 million of that commitment. We're going to keep our eye out because it's the third time. And third time is when they throw that red card. And this 3-card Molly, we're not going to let happen this time. We're going to continue to fight, monitor, and hold them accountable. One of the ways I've been suggesting to hold corporate America accountable for the pledges that it has made is similar to how we hold them accountable, or Harvard, Yale hold the contributors and the commitments and the pledges of those who contribute to the endowments or pledge. You cannot suddenly say, well, I no longer want to live up to the endowment commitment. Well, give a try at that and see how it works out. And as a lawyer, I can tell you how it's worked out. And I'm sure my fellow lawyers who are watching, it's called a promissory estoppel. People relied on your promise to go to college. People relied on your promise to sign up for job training programs because you said you had billions of dollars in jobs coming, as is what we're hearing today, and billions of dollars in social programs for after school and for racial sensitivities. Well, we're going to rely on that. And if it doesn't come about, we're going to do what Harvard and Yale would do if you were to abdicate your responsibility and commitment for the pledge you've made to their endowments. So I suggest that that be an avenue. And I'd like to also continue to talk about some of the other economic justice movements that we should continue to fight. We know that reparations is the purpose of Ncobra, and we know that our fight, we're getting closer and closer to that reality of reparations of some sort. Indeed, we thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee for shepherding H.R. 40. Originally, as we know, I don't have to educate you, advocated or proposed and by Congressman Conyers for 25 years. We finally got it past the Judiciary Committee. And now we believe we have enough votes. I'm not educating, I'm educating the PhD folks. I know you got a PhD in all this, but for those who are working on their bachelor's in this information, I'm going to bring it to you. And that is that, yes, we have a majority of votes, and it appears that H.R. 40 will pass in the body of Congress. However, our challenge is the U.S. Senate. And quite frankly, it's it's unlikely that we'll have enough votes for it to pass in the US Senate. And it concerns me. One of the things that I'm keeping my eye out on is all the support we're hearing, however, from white liberals, from the president himself, Biden, saying that they now support H.R. 40, the study for compensation and remedies to the historic transfer of wealth, the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind. And so the avenues that are being pursued in H.R. 40 may not be our last attempt to pass this legislation should the US Senate reject it, as is unfortunately expected to occur. Our president has the ability by executive order to create a commission of some sort to seek the same remedy that H.R. 40 seeks, and that is studying how to compensate our journey and our destruction of our families and our communities. Speaking of families, our president signed an executive order to bring together the families of Central American immigrants. Certainly, we're sensitive to that and want those families to be brought together, because we know how it is having our families torn apart, having our families devastated, and the vestiges that continue, the criticism of Black men whom you trained as no more than studs to make babies and snatch them away from their families. And now you're so puzzled about why, in many instances, our households go fatherless because of the vestiges of what you programmed and forced Black men to behave as. And so we seek to make sure that that compensation and that joining together of our families, I would love to say rejoining together, but from our arrival here in Africa, our families were torn apart when we hit the soil of Native American land. And so with that in mind, that remedy for reparations, we must continue to fight for, and we can fight at the executive order of our current president, who attributes so much of his election to us. And as I conclude, because I know we have a full conference and I'm not going to be one that even take up perhaps all the minutes I have been given, but let me just say that the executive order and other strategies, the final strategy or the next strategy I think we should embark on is to join or solicit the support of our union brothers and sisters. Throughout our sojourn, they have been our partners. They were our partners in the civil rights movement. We're all partners now in the fight for a $15 minimum wage. So we ask that they extend that partnership to supporting H.R. 40 and the request subsequently of an executive order by our president. They have the power in the Democratic Party. So with the power of the unions and the so-called support of the white liberals of the Democratic Party, I don't see why we couldn't get that executive order and achieve a true partnership with this administration. So as I leave, the last suggestion or analysis I would have for repayment of this debt is the congressional committee or group, the Democratic congressional group that has proposed a $10 trillion commitment from this country over the next 10 years that will address climate change and many of the other liberal causes that may or may not benefit the masses of our people or benefit them in a very limited way. What we have, as if they were to suggest so, that there must be available 10 trillion somewhere, and that's only a little less than what many economists believe that we are owed. And so 1 trillion a year we could take care of that debt. If you have it for climate change, if you have it for these liberal causes that you think as paternalists is what we need for our people, we say to you, no, we want the $1 trillion a year toward reparations. That money is available. If you are proposing it for anything, that means it's there. Proposing it means it hasn't been given yet. So instead of designating something that haven't been given to some other act of injustice, designate that money to the greatest act of injustice in the history of the world, certainly an injustice that built this country. The other methods, including government bonds to raise revenue and many others, can be discussed and sought out as we go through this process. And while the gains and costs of reparations means that everyone in the United States is a stakeholder, reparations remains a moral issue singularly centered on a more broadly racial justice as a whole. And it is here to stay until a satisfactory answer is found. I want to thank you all for having me once again. I continue to speak out with the same morals, purpose, and the same values as Ncobra, and you can count on me to be your partner.
Thank you so much, Judge Mathis.
Thank you.
Great thanks.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate that, Brother Cam Howard has been laying the foundation for local reparations in his book, which is exactly that title. We can continue to do this work by continuing to follow Judge Mathis, continue to follow Cam Howard, continue to follow all of our authors. And speaking of which, we should get a comprehensive history of Ncobra as presented to us by our wonderful, beautiful, and amazing sister, Queen Adjoa. Please, before.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I first of all want to thank the convention committee for inviting me to do this. Many of you know that I have been a part of Ncobra since its founding, and I really appreciate lifting up its history. It reminds me of talking about our history reminds me in some ways of Sankofa. We can't have present day work and future work if we don't understand our base, our founding, why we came together, what we did. I wrote a chapter that is, many of you know, in Ray Winbush's book called oh God, I just thought about it. I have the book right here, Should America Pay? I'm sorry, my brain went, Should America Pay, on the creation and work of Ncobra at its beginning. And I refer people to that. The book also has many other important pieces, but this is very important for those of us who want to continue Ncobra and the base upon which it's built. I want to point out just some few things about the foundation of it. I know we have a hard stop at 1:40 because of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And I've asked somebody, and Rashawn, if you'll do that, send me a text or wave your hand or something like that when I'm about 5 minutes out. And I can wrap up again if I need be after she speaks. But Ncobra was founded at the response to, or I'm not sure if it's a response to, but I was asked because I became involved in reparations early on. I was involved in the early 80s. I was very active in at some points in the leadership of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. I saw this poster. Some of you know this story. I'm walking back to work in the, I think, early to mid 80s time. I don't remember the exact year. And I see this poster of Anro with some of you may have seen it back then, with Uncle Sam and the pointing out at me at that point, but at all of us, saying Uncle Sam owes us and trillions of dollars. I can't remember the exact number. And my heart said, yes. it just sang. It just, you know, because I've been working on racial justice issues and social justice issues for a number of years, working at the Department of Justice on imprisonment and prisons. And it just, yes, it resounded. I was involved with, got connected with through NCBL, Chokwe, well, before NCBL really, but Chokwe and Nkechi became my reparations mentor, because I'm like, yeah, you know, I was never known as a nationalist. I wasn't although Nkechi says everybody's in the Republic of New Africa if you're Black, but I wasn't in the Republic of New Africa. But Chokwe and Nkechi, you know, I worked with them in NCBL, and then I was asked by David Adams in 1987, who was the associate director of NCBL, to organize a panel on reparations for the conference that year, which was focused on the biennial of the Constitution, and the theme being, what would the Constitution have been if it was written with our interest, right, in heart? And so I organized that panel with Chokwe and Mario Bedelli, Dr. Richard America, who some of you may know and some of you may not know, but he's a Black economist. He's now on emeritus status with Georgetown University. And he had done a lot of work along with a couple of other Black economists on what's the bill for the unpaid labor. So we had that panel. In the meantime, after we issued the invitation, Imari issued a call to form an organization. And at that point, the organization's goals, according to Imari, at that point in his email, when I say, I don't mean according to Imari, were two. One was the development of a group that focused on reparations, and the other was a focus on supporting the armed struggle in Namibia, South Africa, and Angola. Later, I found out that the actual idea for this formation of a broad group, coalition, organization, to focus on reparations in the Angola, South Africa, and Namibia was actually from Doris Benton Lewis, our esteemed past co-chair of Ncobra, but long roots in the reparations movement back to 1968 in Alaska, nonetheless. So, and I say that because I think one of the points I think we have to remember, and I know I'm not going to have time for us to develop it, but so many times the contributions of our women get kind of submerged in that. In the founding of Ncobra, it's important to know that actually Dorothy and Imari worked hand in hand. Dorothy reached out to him with the idea because she felt it would be much better received from him. And so that was, you know, an honor that I found out about that. It's an honor to Imari because of the stature that he had in the movement. But we really need to lift up not just Dorothy Benton Lewis because of her work with Ncobra and being enshrined or enthroned, I think the term is, as Queen Mother in Ncobra, but also all the years of work she did and how she actually is the mother in some ways of our current modern day movement. So at that call, it was the meetings, we had 5 meetings, one of which was in Philadelphia. The first meeting was in DC, and I think all the other 4 were in DC, if I'm not mistaken. My chapter isn't as clear on that, but maybe it's not clear because we're all in DC other than the Philadelphia one. Vincent, well, his name was Vincent then. Kalonji Olusegun chaired those meetings. He was with the Foreign Affairs Task Force of RNA. We went through, we formed the organization in the spring of 1988. It became officially an organization. The co-founders and the bringing together 3 organizations that are official co-founders of Ncobra are the National Congress of Black Lawyers, the New African Peoples Organization, and the Republic of New Africa. Kalonji and I served as the first co-chairs, male co-chair, of course, being Kalonji, female co-chair being me. The history of the development of it, and I think there are a couple of points I want to make that I think are critical, much like I think it's a critical point to know where Dorothy is situated in the actual calling for and founding of Ncobra. I think a critical point there's several discussions that took place at our founding meetings. One, what should the organization be called? It wasn't like, I guess now, it's like any organization's called whatever it is and people don't know any of the discussion around how you got there. But the concern was we wanted to call it something that engendered support, but did not unnecessarily engender a dispute or a division. And so we spent, I would say, at least 2 meetings actually discussing the name. And we came up with Ncobra because we felt it was one that, was broad enough. Coalition of Blacks was broad enough to include anyone of African descent that was Black. And we wanted to make sure it was Black because we also knew at that time, and we probably still know now, that if you just say Africans, you're not just dealing with Black Africans, you're dealing with people who born in Africa, maybe, in fact, some may be part of the oppressor group, so to speak. All of them that look not like they're not Black aren't necessarily part of the oppressor group, but many of them are. So we worked with that for a while, went through a lot of different names, all of which I can't get to you, remember. But
Lara, she's an assistant professor in the Department of Women's Gender.
You're gonna be muted soon, don't worry.
should I keep going, Rashawn, or what? Okay. So where was I? I'm sorry, I got distracted.
In the name.
Okay, so we ended up with that name. It was another point I wanted to make and I just lost it, sorry. So we came up with Ncobra. Now it was Amari's suggestion that we put an apostrophe. Now some of y'all know this story and some of y'all don't. The reason why is he felt it should represent Ncobra. The apostrophe is almost like creating this snake, the cobra, that snaps at, cuts the neck off, bites you, whatever. And that was his recommendation. Lots of discussion about it. I'm not saying just because he recommended it, it was like hands down, everybody agreed. But that's why it's the apostrophe. Apostrophe separates the N, national, from cobra, and to emphasize the role of a cobra, the snake cobra, right? And you saw in some of the stationery that was designed by my beloved friend and brother Kalanji represents some of that without having, the way he made some of the letterhead. So we go on, we organize, we have people who are really reaching out to bring in other groups after. So at the first meetings, we had at least 25 organizations and individuals represented. And there were more than 25 people in the room, but at least 25 organizations were represented and quite a few others were there. After we did the organization, so to speak, I would want to point out that the actual initial call for and meetings for Ncobra represented what Ncobra is still about now, coalition building. We reached out, the call that Imari with the impetus of Sister Dorothy sent out were to organizations who already had in their program or platform reparations. It wasn't to get new people. It was to get people who already had in their program of action or platform reparations. So it's the first, it shows that the foundation of Ncobra is coalition building. The very foundation is to reach out to get other organizations and individuals who may have other interests as well, but who embrace reparations. And it doesn't have to be embrace reparations for so many years, but it's that we aren't we're educating the general public, but we are building on those who support reparations to help us do that. The third, I think that's the third point I wanted to make. One was what it really meant to have Dorothy be the one to be the foundation of it, so to speak. Now it's the coalition building. The third high point in our creation that I want to point out, and again, I refer you back to my chapter. I spent time reading it and outlining. I can't put everything in there that I think you may be interested in this talk. But the third point I want to make is, how did we get to making HR 40 one of our primary focuses for all these years, right? We got there because Ncobra activists in Detroit, Michigan, members in Detroit, Michigan, led by Reparations Ray Jenkins, and it was more than him, but he was kind of the focal point, the leader, and he's the one that we call Reparations Ray, because he bugged Congressman Conyers. Now, I mean, it wasn't even, I'm not even trying to make it sound nice and polite and, he was a lobbyist. No, he bugged Representative Conyers because he had helped Representative Conyers get the seat that he had, right? He had no sense of, this guy is all that and bag of chips now that he's in the Congress, and he bugged him along with some of the Detroit members until Congressman Conyers agreed to introduce a bill on reparations. What happened? The confluence of things, which we all know in our lives and organization building, but also our personal lives. Sometimes we're starting out focusing on one thing and something happens that either pushes it forward or makes us go on a new track, right? Something that's not even in that sphere. But what happened was a Japanese American bill passed. And Congressman Conyers then developed what was, I think it was 3745. It becomes HR 40. But the first time he introduced the bill was, I think, 3745, because 40 had already been taken. But what he did first, importance of Ncobra, strategy of Ncobra, we had a town hall meeting because he sent to us Ncobra, because remember, Detroit Ncobra was the one that pushed him. He sent to us, National Ncobra, a draft of the bill, right? So me and Kalanji then were facilitated or chairs of a town hall meeting in DC and in this community. And we had, it was packed. It was packed. And we had ANRO, other organizations. People were ticked. I was going to use another word, but I'm polite. Ticked, because this was a study bill. Why is it a study bill? This should just be a bill giving us reparations, right? Why are you His rationale, which I think on hindsight could be said to be good or not so good, is he said, this is based on the Japanese American bill that just passed. Surely, if they will pass this bill for the Japanese Americans, they'll pass it for us, because he wasn't down in the injury to the Japanese Americans by any means, that I don't want anyone to say or feel that Ncobra was. We know the significant injury to Japanese Americans in World War II. Nobody is saying it wasn't. But his thought was, we were enslaved for 200 and some years. We've had the Jim Crow, all of those things that we all know, and I don't have time to outline, but we all know. Surely, was his point. Well, he was naive, if I can say that about the esteemed congressman, because he did not know, and maybe naive is not the right word. Some of y'all scholars, Judge Mathis, think of a word for me if you will, because he did not recognize or understand the depth of racism against Black people, right? He did not understand that it went to the very core, or didn't factor it in. He may have known it intellectually. I know he was a smart man, but he did not factor in the depth of white supremacy as it relates to Black people, and how they'd sooner die almost than to recognize their crimes and make reparations for their crimes against us, right? The second thing is the role that Japan played in the passage of the bill. for Japanese Americans. We did not have, and the fact that at that time, the US was trying to repair World War II split in between Japan and the United States. We didn't have a similar kind of relationship with an African country at that time that had similar kind of power, so to speak. Thank you. Somebody said overly optimistic. Thank you for that in the chat. So here we go. And so we get the bill, we get this town hall meeting, is screaming and hollering. You know, some of y'all may know what happens in those bills. We had to end up getting security to put some people out because it became real. This was not just heated, it was really heated. So the bill gets introduced. And so we've been working on that since that time in various levels, led by initially, we had a legal strategy commission within which there was a legislative commission that Nkichi chaired that legislative commission. And then we separated the legal strategies commission with the legislative commission, and the legislation commission had continued and I believe still continues to take the lead in organizing the work around HR 40. The second point I want to make, and I don't see Rashawn raising his hand, so I'll keep going. The second point I want to make is that Ncobra decided after it was organized, and it was the conference in Baton Rouge that we initiated, and I believe that was in the 90 or something like that, 1990, to create commissions. So I got ahead of myself when I went to the Legal Strategy Commission, because we felt that the work of Ncobra could be better done if we had commissions that were focused on one area or primary area of our work. So we had initially legal strategies, as I pointed out, that had under it, within it, legislative. We had membership, was one of the first. And I'm blanking on the other. So we didn't have all of the ones we have now as the first commissions. There were like 2 or 3 or 4 that were our first commissions. But that was the beginning of an idea that we specialize within this national grassroots organization and have subgroups within it that are focused on certain issues and putting forward to the board recommendations for work that becomes the national's work. That's an important piece because one board can't do it all. You got to have subcommittees and what we call commissions. And so that's the grounding of where Ncobra wanted people to work. I think the third thing, I don't know, I forgot the numbers now. The other point I want to make that I think is critical to today that the history feeds into is that we determined that we were as a coalition going to actively reach out to organizations that may not have had reparations. Remember, the founding were reaching out to organizations that had reparations as part of their program. In the early 90s, late 89 and early 90s, we decided to start reaching out to organizations that may not have had reparations in their program, but were focused on and involved in, grounded in racial justice, right, in some form. So who else to reach out to but NAACP? Well, who was the head of NAACP at that time was Ben Chavis, Brother Muhammad now, right? We reached out to them. They came on full blast and supported and joined Ncobra at that time. And out of that came their legislative body led by, oh God, his name just went out of my head, my homeboy. I'll think of it, came on, and he continues. He's still the head of their legislative arm in DC. And they have actively participated in supporting HR 40, have been at hearings and continue to have HR 40 as a part of their legislative agenda. The second group we reached out to, Dorothy said, let's reach out to sororities. You know, Dorothy was a member of the Delta Sigma Theta. Delta Sigma Theta was founded on issues around social justice and racial justice. That was its ground. So she reached out to them, and then there were others. Janita Obadeli belonged to a sorority, and I'm blanking on this name, Phi somebody or other. But in other words, we began to reach out to groups beyond just those who had reparations within their program, but also groups that had social justice. So again, our foundation started being built in layers, and recognizing that we need to educate. When we start reaching out beyond our groups who already buy into reparations, it meant that in many instances we had to educate, and we either educated individuals. Thank you, Sigma Gamma Rho, Mama Janita, great. So we had to educate. So that was part of our outreach. The National Bar Association, one of my good friends was on the board of trustees, reached out to him, got us into a meeting. They took on reparations, and they not only put it in their program at that time, but they also developed a task force around reparations. So that's the building, the history of Ncobra has been one of internal struggle, internal discussion, and then external outreach, that some of which led to external struggle, because we had to convince some groups that that reparations was something they needed to be a part of. Because what do we find even at the beginning that we're still finding now, maybe less so? We found at the beginning that people want to say, but I'm dealing with critical issues right now. I'm a social justice advocate looking at housing. I'm a social justice advocate, race advocate looking at healthcare. I'm looking at all of these very important issues. The critical point in our founding, for me, in how do we address that, and we did it in Ncobra, but it came through our brother, our first elder. It came through Ron Walters, because I was having lunch with Ron before Ncobra's conference in DC around that time in the early 90s. And I said, how do we convince Ron? How do we convince people that the current very important issues, criminal punishment, health, blah, 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 or can be, or are part of, not are part of, how do we convince them to join the reparations movement? And he said, you must educate them on the connection between what they're doing now and the call for reparations. How, in fact, as my friend Charles Ogletree said, there is an unbroken chain between health, and Charles was talking about criminal punishment. So that's the work that we began to look at in the Legal Strategies Commission. What are those areas of injury that flow from slavery, that flow from the legacy of slavery, that flow from the injury for which we are demanding reparations? And so we came up with 5 injury areas. I will just briefly say them. I promised my sister Kenneth that I will work all this summer to go through all my files, all my tapes from all those meetings, to pull together a document on the 5 injury areas. But those 5 injury areas, we decided, and this is not the only injury areas, but these to us were the most critical. Peoplehood, nationhood. Why peoplehood, nationhood? Peoplehood, nationhood, because we was.
Adjoa, can you give us a 5? We just have our sister Sheila Jackson Lee just entered.
Sure.
But this is the perfect timing.
Okay, good. The 5, so just tell them and then we can talk about it later. 5 injury areas: peoplehood, nationhood, criminal punishment, education, wealth and poverty, and health, which includes mental health. Thank you very much. And I look forward to questions and discussion after our esteemed Congresswoman speaks.
That candle was turning into a nice little fire. We appreciate the energy. I really do. Thank you for the history. Thank you for the context. And thank you for the support. I do want to say before, formally introducing Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, that I myself, as a 27-year-old choosing to do this work, volunteering, community program director, a series of other things, if y'all don't share it, I don't know. So there's a lot of things that I won't really know how to do. In martial arts, you get trained how to hold your hand, how to hold your feet before you throw a punch. And a lot of our generation are throwing a lot of punches. They don't really know how to hold their hands and hold their feet. So it's extremely important that we are not shy about this information. And in the TikTok era, it's kind of interesting that TikTok is a representative of a clock. Many of our generation don't really care to have the time to get all the information in the manner that we need to. So we got to come up with some innovative ways and strategies so that we can download this information, because our generation does want to fight, but doesn't necessarily have the patience to learn what they need to or be in the books as they need to. So I digress. Let's get back on track. Thank you, Sister Sheila Jackson Lee, for all the work that you've been doing, all the work that you continue to do. You've taken the mantle, you've taken the torch, you've taken the baton, and you keep on running. Hopefully we can continue to add fire or throw coal into the train that you are bulldozing through, or using to bulldoze through. And without further ado, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very kindly to our moderator and to the Ncobra family, which I'm a lifetime member. I'll usually make a donation around this time of the year, so I'll be sure to hit the website later on this afternoon. A 30-second conference dedicated to discussion of reparations now and more than a check. Interesting to hear part of that history, because Ncobra has been the legacy organization promoting and pushing reparations over this last most important period. Just a quick shout out to Cam and Mashariki, the co-chairs, and I see our sister Esther Stanford is joined us from across the pond. I just have to give her a shout out because she was at the founding of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century in Atlanta in 2001, way back then. And it's good to see that she is still very much on the case. Our speaker for this afternoon, our keynote speaker, is a longtime friend. And I was reflecting on that, and many of us perhaps don't know that she began as a municipal judge. She is an attorney, of course, but she also served on the Houston City Council, and she served with distinction. When you go back and read the record of the kind of work she was doing, she served with distinction. In 1994, she was elected to Congress by a landslide, defeating an incumbent overwhelmingly. And she has continued to do so ever since. Every time she gets elected, it's not even close. I don't even know why people even bother, because she is tirelessly working on behalf of her constituents. And I must say that for all the work that she does, I've witnessed her up close working with her constituents tirelessly. In fact, before there was 5-hour energy, there was something called Geritol. And so she must take a good shot of Geritol every now and then, because she is constantly in motion. I've been privileged to work for her, as I said before, for many, many years, working with her around Haiti. She will recall Maria Dupaval of the Haitian American Ministries, hosting Danny Glover when we did Cruising into History. She did that for us. And she went on a fact-finding delegation with us to Haiti, in which we were hosted by the US ambassador. And most of the critical leadership in the struggle for democracy and development turned out from Haiti. She has been a strong advocate and proponent for Haiti, the first Black republic. She may also recall that she fought tirelessly for an issue that we still need to bring back to our attention: justice for the Seminole Black freedmen and the Cherokee freedmen in Oklahoma. She is a powerful voice and force in the Congress on the issues, matters of civil rights and human rights and democracy. And when you hear her speak, at least for me, I hear Barbara Jordan. I hear the voice of this preeminent person, because she is so eloquent, so precise in how she presents herself. She has inherited the torch from her beloved mentor and colleague, the Honorable John Conyers. She has emerged as the undisputed legislative champion for reparations in HR 40. We saw her like gavel in. We saw her gavel in Juneteenth. That's our Sheila Jackson Lee, standing there proudly before the House of Representatives, gaveling in Juneteenth. She has emerged as someone who is very impatient, saying why we can't wait for reparations in HR 40. She has worked tirelessly on this cause. So it's my honor to introduce my longtime friend, one of the great leaders of our time. She is the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, the visionary, courageous lead sponsor, and I say again, the undisputed champion of reparations in HR 40, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee from the 18th Congressional District in Houston, Texas.
How honored I am to be able to be in your midst, in your company, but as well to have a scholar, a powerful leader, a persistent warrior and revolutionary in Dr. Ron Daniels, called me his dear friend of some years. All of us, Rashid, will count that as a moment of wisdom, for we remain forever young, because the fight never ends. And for me, it will not end until we have reached that moment. Cam, thank you. We are in your territory or close to it. I don't know if my dear sister is there in Kichi, and certainly the sister that was speaking, and just the massive audience that I know happens to be all of you. How renowned to be 32 years in speaking the truth. There's a lot of folk can convene and be convicted and be engaged, but it is something to be engaged telling the truth, and telling the truth when others would not listen. So let me give you, as you well know, this is a day where I'm sitting in my office now, but in 2 minutes or so, I'm going to be, toward the airport. I've got you on a small device, so things may look funny, but I'm gonna keep talking. But let me give you a couple of minutes now and give you a different perspective. I do want to start off with a scripture that is Matthew 17:10. So Jesus said to them, because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. That is the journey of those of us who have advocated, my dear beloved friend, John Conyers, for HR 40. We had to tell mountains to move. We had to have a mustard seed. We had to believe that nothing was impossible for us. We have had mountains and valleys. We've had dry deserts. We had starts and stops. So Dr. Daniels is right. I believe that we should craft and modernize the terminology of our beloved brother, Dr. King, who had his moments of why we can't wait, and we should give him his accolades because he took to activism after all of the talking that he did. 250,000 people in 1963. He had to take to activism in order to move the 1964 Civil Rights Act and then the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which was led by a bloody journey over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. No, it is not a call for violence, it is a call for action. And we have been doing that in our nonviolent way. So let me be very clear. The miracle of Juneteenth, just a miracle. It'll take too long to give you the history. The over and over submitting resolutions, having 10 people on it or 40 people on it, or going door to door and saying, will your members sign onto a commemoration of Juneteenth? Being the only and first member of Congress that introduced the legislation. Finally, the courage. My mother, Opal Lee, grandmother, she takes the grandmother status, I'm gonna grab the mother status. Brought up 1.6 million petitions 2 years ago, 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, time goes. Hot day. There were a few of us that were on the ground to receive those 1.6 million petitions, 94 years old now. And so that was a journey. And one would wonder, what is the timing? We know in a few minutes, our dear brother, Killer, is going to be sentenced right in your neck of the woods, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Officer Chauvin for the death of my constituent's beloved brother, George Floyd. So we know there was an atmosphere such that when we did the resolution 2 years or so ago, I can't remember, pre-pandemic, our numbers were sizably higher. And then when we did the bill, we had numbers that could grapple with the idea of a bill. I think that bill was introduced in a moment of the past administration. But we can't wait. And we had an idea of a mustard seed. And then we read General Order number 3. And General Order number 3, the order that General Granger told us about, made the announcement in these freed slaves, the slaves to be freed. There were these words, equality of rights. Is that not HR 40? Equality of rights, but we had never received. And so I don't want anyone to be skewed from the connectedness or the mindset or the accepting of something that was taking on a power of its own. I couldn't slam the door on it. I had to be able to make sure that I carried both of us on our backs. Just imagine the throngs of slaves, 2.5 years. No master who could read or write was going to whisper to them and say, by the way, you're free. Didn't tell them. They knew it. And General Granger had to come and announce. And as he did so, in it was, of course, the word, the slaves are free. But then he finished it by saying, and you may stay as an employer and employee with wages. I'm not being humorous, but I venture to say, slaves who cannot read did not know what employer was, did not know what employee was. For me, that was highfalutin words. And wages, maybe a few. But one thing they did know, they knew about being free. And I can assure you, as the story is recounted to those of us in Texas, there was a massive movement. And maybe in the current vernacular, we could say they were out of there. They were up and out of there. They were moving up the emancipation trail. They were not going to be an employer and employee and wages. They were out of there to the extent that they knew that they would find land, they would collaborate together. But they had suffered bondage for an extra 2.5 years. They had been denied the wealth of this nation, the wealth of their brawn, the brutality that they had been subjected to. They never got a single pence or penny for it. Juneteenth opens the door for people that don't look like us to freely say slavery and what is it? An example in the airport, teacher that does not look like me, said, thank you for Juneteenth. I said, yes, now, we don't need to look at critical race theory. Get in there and teach slavery and that history to all of the boys and girls. As the members went home and the holiday surprised everybody and the celebrations imploded, Washington, D.C. organized theirs, one of them in the Swahili village, the night before. Once it was signed, they organized it Thursday, and it was imploded with people on Friday. This is to say, we are on the road for HR 40. Never to be forgotten what the stepping stones are all about. Your struggle, your educating of the public, the meeting of over 300 organizations led by Dr. Daniels every single Thursday is not for naught. Legislatively, we're coming to the end of the month. We're doing some quiet procedural things in the House right now. We're also meeting with leadership because, as you well know, it's seeping into July. But we cannot lift our moment of emphasis and pressure. Now is the time to ride this question of race equity, General Order number 3, equality of rights, the freeing of the slaves, the story to be told, and its finish or its completion or its connectedness is HR 40, the Commission to Study Reparations and develop reparation proposals. And now we must get into the DNA of all of those under 40, under 30, that don't know maybe all what is HR 40, but they had a celebration on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday about Juneteenth. And they're ready to go and ready to work. They're ready to study and ready to develop the analytical assessment of how the disparities, economically, socially, psychologically, scientifically, health-wise, educationally, has to be addressed. And the so-called critical race theory, which is truthful, which is at the level of graduate students and lawyers and others, it is true. That's why we need the commission, because race permeated all how we were dealt with, from the complete immunity of hanging us, to the years that it took to prosecute those who killed us during the civil rights movement, killed the 3 Mississippi boys, killed the little girls in Birmingham, did the sniper shooting of civil rights leaders unknown or workers, killed Viola Liuzzo and many others, redlined us, took away our GI benefits, burned Greenwood, of which they are begging us for reparations. I'm going to suggest that we get back with them again and we do some national virtual tours to be able to reignite their request when we were there. Reparations. That's what they asked us for. So your convention, as I begin to move devices, is crucial, because the reason why it is crucial, this is probably an unusual guest speaking, but the reason why it is crucial, because we have to leave from this convention with marching orders. And those marching orders have to be that we are more than ready for the equality of rights. We want to breathe life into General Granger's words that were given in 1865. And we want to make sure that we make a difference. We make a difference in going forward in July. Where's this thing? The phone. That we make a difference in going forward in July, and that we make that as, again, another moment where we say why we can't wait. This is a time that the mustard seed must be. You are hearing us talk about infrastructure. You're hearing the people who are dealing with the idea of a budget reconciliation. It means that we who are progressives are not going to just go with a compromise. We've got to go with all that our people need. Well, here's where we are at HR 40. We're not going with a compromise. We're going with all that we need. All that we need. That is what is important. So I thank you so very much for having me. And I am going to proceed. You hold on just a minute. I have to interrupt. Excuse me. Put that on silent, please. On. Can you turn this on? Am I on? Can you turn this back on?
You are back.
You're on, Congresswoman.
Okay. So what I want us to be able to do is to, as Ncobra, to be the leading force and voice on our next steps. And that is, I think, a nationwide effort, building on the work we still have to do on George Floyd, the voting rights, HR 40, a racial equity, social equity agenda. That is what is important. So let me yield for a moment, because I'm going to another device, and then I will close and be able to thank you for having me, but I'll be walking through a hallway, continue to speak to you. Can I do that?
Yes, you may.
So let me conclude my remarks by, again, encouraging a national effort. Ncobra is superb for being the kind of leaders who are well entrenched and well known, along with this coalition that we have. I say to you that there are strong supporters. The Congressional Black Caucus will be sending a letter to the leadership asking for this legislation to be put on the floor of the House. That is very impactful. We've orchestrated that. In addition, we'll be working with the Congressional Progressive Caucus and we are continuing Dr. Moderate and Conservative. And the way I use the Juneteenth, I tell them that we gave them a gift. Did they enjoy or did they participate in the Juneteenth activities? And 201, they have. And I said, the way you can describe this is you tell those individuals that we want to get to the truth. That's why we're doing HR 40, because we want to get to the truth and do it with a smile on your face. In addition, we will have individuals who can co-sponsor, but individuals who will vote for it, even if they didn't co-sponsor when it comes to the floor. So let me take you to a concluding moment. And I don't know if this is a question and answer or was kind enough to call me Keynote, but I'm just a tutor and a teacher to be able to say that this is our time. The time is now. And we can only imagine those slaves. Only imagine what it means to find out that you 2.5 years longer suffered the brunt of the whip, the separation of the family. Reminded of the story narrative of slave husband and wife. She called him husband, she called him wife. When he went up to the other plantation, she had to give him an emergency call and said, husband, come back. They're selling me to one plantation and they're selling our children to another. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the kind of life that is, that has never been told children and children's children of today and never understood our plight? I don't know if anyone can rest until we get this commission to understand the real truth of America. Only truth will set us free. To each and every one of you, I provide you with my final words: equality of rights. We demand it now, and that is HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals. Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you, Sister Sheila Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We have so many questions. I see that you are currently in transition. We have one question that someone has asked for McHugh. I wanted to know if you will be able to take that question.
I will, and as I do so, I again want to give my appreciation to Cam Howard. I mean, he has been stupendous, like a rock. He knows legislation and the legislative process better than the rest of us. Dr. Daniels, is that not true? We rely upon him and Dr. Daniels and all others. I cannot thank you enough for being the rock that has been the guiding force, the mountain that has been the force of strength for all of us. Thank you so very much for giving me this honor to speak here today. Sorry, it is such a unique process that we're doing, but I can take the question. Ready to hear you.
Question is coming from Jerry Shaw. What compromises are Democrats willing to make with the GOP to ensure that the bill, that the companion bill S40 passes in the Senate? And how will HR 40 go to the House floor? When will HR 40 go to the House floor for a vote?
Well, thank you for the question. We take this legislative process day by day. The Juneteenth was within 24 hours and a one-day rule debate and general debate, which is inside the ballgame talk. But what happened with Juneteenth never has happened in a bill, to my knowledge, in the history that I've been in the United States Congress. So this is a very unpredictable circumstance. It's all in the atmosphere. It's all in the kind of advocacy and weight that we see popping up in the next month, which is what we're trying to do. But specifically, the bill will go to the House first because it's very much co-sponsored by every single leadership person. And so it's all in the timing and seeing that what we have in place, that we can move it in a certain way, because obviously it would have to be votes or it have to be unanimous consent, and that's all extremely challenging. As relates to the Senate, that is an additional challenge. We have about, I think, 25 co-sponsors led by Senator Booker. I'd have to rely upon him. And the way we get Republicans is one step at a time. And that's what we're doing in the House, and that's what we'll have to do in the Senate. And then there are other options that will be placed before us to get this commission stood up.
Thank you very much. Last question is, what are the ways that the young people can support you, being as though we are ridiculously distracted and some of us may be particularly unengaged? What are the ways that we can actually, other than just being registered to vote and being more active, what are the ways that we can actually be supportive of this resolution moving forward?
No, I'd like to elicit, solicit, and create a young battalion, for lack of a better word. Team always sounds, if you will, frequently used, but a young force of those for just a month, maybe just the 30 days or the 2 months. And that is to do first the Twitter storm, that HR 40 to the floor, HR 40 to the floor, and then teach-ins. Because we're virtual, there's always some elder or wise one or wise young one that knows about HR 40. Do teach-ins on the grass, on summer school, ask questions about it, create a buzz. We have a number of various folk in the entertainment industry. Reach out to your favorite person and ask them to support HR 40, and pastors, teachers, and otherwise, so that there is a multiple layer of sound coming into the United States House of Representatives. That is going to be very important, and we will talk further whether or not, in quotes, we need to convene on that time frame during this next couple of weeks. But you can be active virtually. You can be self-imposed activism. You can take a look at Juneteenth time together. That's when we were free, and now we need to tell the truth. I've got a new phrase. Now we need HR 40 so the truth can be told. And I hope that that can incite people and turn to experts, elders, as I said, that are in your community. We probably have one HR 40 advocate in every jurisdiction or every block or corner, at least that has knowledge about it, that they can coalesce with.
Okay, thank you so much. It sounds like we have a lot of work to do. We have enough Babas, doctors, elders, queen mothers to make sure that we can lead a battalion of young people, including myself. So let's get to work.
We'll be talking with you. We definitely want you in.
I'm here.
Brother Rashad, could I just, as the Congresswoman was acknowledging Cam is a good brother, but let me just tell you something. The person who really throwing down is Kenneth Henry. I just got to say that. I mean, this right. Is phenomenal. I apologize to you, Sister Kenneth. I had you in my notes to say in my introduction, and I felt terribly about that because we have an HR 40 strategy group that meets every Thursday, and she knows I do not start the meeting until Kenneth Henry show up. Now, Cam can show up, but if Kenneth ain't in the meeting don't start. So I just wanted to say, give out, Kenneth Henry is incredible. I had her on my show. I honored her. I called her phenomenal Black woman, and she took me through all the techniques that she uses and so forth. So in Kenneth Henry, we have a gem that just will not stop. She is the rock that keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. And we're almost up to 200 co-sponsors on the HR 40 side and H40 on S40 on the Senate side, I think up to almost 27 or whatever. But anyway, I just wanted to say that because to do otherwise would be a major omission. So thank you very much for allowing me to that point of.
Thank you,
Well,
Dr. Daniels. Now you're going to have to stay on and hang out with me for the next phase. Thank you.
Kenneth, forgive me. There's no doubt of your iconic presence and your continued gentle reminding, and that's a very polite terminology. Get those co-sponsors, and she knows how to get them herself, but she is clearly a driving force. So thank you so very much. I hope you hear me saying it truthfully and honestly. Thank you again.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, for those kind words of support. I appreciate them. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. All right, I'm going to sign off. And thank you for giving me the honor. I hope I have given you some words of both challenge, encouragement, and strength, and to realize that the nameless who have never been honored or recognized, that were born, lived, and died in slavery, are looking to us for their redemption, and to be able to deal with our current population that too can be improved with an understanding of where we've come from and where we're going. That is HR 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. Equality of rights. Take the mustard seed and move the mountain.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. That's a perfect timing because we will be transitioning into our Legislative Committee Digest. Before we do that, I would love for our sister Adjoa to continue with what she was presenting, allow for us to get into Q&A, take a 15-minute break, stretch. Don't forget to reach to the sky and touch our toes. It's an extremely silly thing to say, but an extremely important thing to do because in this particular generation, we've been sitting a whole lot more. So during this 15-minute break, even if you don't have anything to do, please find something to do to get your body moving, to get your blood moving. But Sister Adjoa, would you like to continue? You were at the 5 injury area mark.
Yeah, I would like to continue, but I would like to continue with answering a question that was put in the chat. I know Cam, I was answering the question of the 5 injury areas, and then Cam put in the link in the chat, the link to Ncobra Online, which gives the injury areas again. I did say the 5 and gives a brief summary. As I said in the talk, I have agreed with Kenneth and that I will work this summer on pulling all the records together and attempting to develop a broader discussion of what we meant when we developed the 5 injury areas in the Legal Strategies Commission. I want to lift up for 1 second though, before I answer the question in the chat. I'm sorry, I keep going, I want to do this. Ron Daniels. Ron Daniels was an example in this chat of what I was saying is one of the principles that we were founded on. And it was the opposite, but it was the right principle, right way. If you remember, I said that Dorothy felt that she would not be able to pull together the Ncobra, so she asked Imari to do the call. And I only found out about that by talking to her, who then I then confirmed with Imari, as you will see if you haven't read the chapter, it is in the chapter because he and the leadership of Ncobra approved that chapter. But what Ron did was without need of asking him, he lifted up a woman leader that plays behind the scenes, does her work, but is a leader in this legislative movement. And I know Ron doesn't need any more praises and acclamations, but to me, that is an example of how we work on and consciously address the issues in our community, ain't just in the white community, of how sometimes men leadership take on the recognition, and the female leadership that may be the base of that leadership gets unspoken of, and I'm not saying that very well, and I apologize. So I want to thank Ron for being an example of how we pull forward our women leadership. It's not to push down our male leadership by any means. Nobody can tear down the leadership of any of our men, starting with Ron Daniels on so many fronts. But what he did is an example of what I hope we continue to know is important to do, is that we lift up both men and women leaders and give acknowledgement in that way. So I want to thank Ron for that. The question in the chat, and I don't know if there are any others that I missed, Brother Rashawn, was how will the relationship of Ncobra to the Reparations Coordinating Committee. Some of you know the Reparations Coordinating Committee was organized initially by Charles Ogletree. God, these names are going out of my head. Blanken, okay, the head of Trans-Africa. Yes, you're on mute, Ron. Say it to me.
Randall Robinson.
Oh, thank you. Oh, God. You know, my brain, I'm not even gonna say my brain is going because I'm getting old, because I'm not getting old and it's not going. It's just got to slip, right? But anyway, Randall Robinson and Charles organized the Reparations Coordinating Committee. It wasn't called that initially. They reached out to a number of us who had been activists in reparations or scholars in reparations. And so it was a long group around the table at Trans-Africa. Then we talked about what it should be called. Charles recommended Reparation Coordinating Committee. He was surprised when I did not object. In fact, he said that in a meeting because of the central role of Ncobra. But my view was that name didn't take away the central role of Ncobra by any means to the reparations movement. I was then asked, and I brought Dorothy into the Reparations Coordinating Committee. So she and I represented Ncobra, and I represented Ncobra and NCBL. I was then asked to co-chair the Reparations Coordinating Committee by Charles and Randall, which I did. The important piece about the Reparations Coordinating Committee, I feel the significance of it. I don't think there was any other significance of it other than just another step in pulling people together and lifting up reparations, was the lawsuit that was filed in 2003 for reparations for the survivors of the Tulsa race massacre. It was unsuccessful in the long run in the sense of getting any remedy. I believe it was successful in the short and long run because of how it lifted up, one, the inability of this legal system to really address honestly and fully reparations and the injuries to, in this instance, the African descendants who survived the massacre. But more broadly speaking, some of you may have read an article I wrote that talks about the blocks to receiving reparations that were built into the legal system. And they continue to be so because the legal system in the United States was not built to give a remedy to these major injustices to us or any other group, but was built to protect, in quotes, the sovereign, which is the United States, and therefore colludes with the denial of justice to Black people. But that case was successful in one regard, is that it lifted up the legal claims and it showed the hypocrisy of the system. We were successful. Some of you know Ron had invited this person to be on the panel. I believe it was Ron, if I'm not mistaken, on the panel, the Juneteenth panel. My good friend and comrade in reparations work, Eric, blank on his last name, Eric Miller, who is a professor now at Loyola Law School in LA, but was a part of the Reparations Coordinating Committee. In fact, he started as an intern to Charles Ogletree. He created what we thought was a leading argument that would get us to a trial. One of the things is we've never actually gotten to a trial on the question of reparations, any of the cases that have been brought, because of these legal barriers. And that he created and thought of the argument that some of us in law know and others I'll explain in hopefully in English real quickly, is the equitable bar, that the statute of limitations should be told as a legal term. The practical term is stop running. And because of equity, which is fairness, right? And the reason being that at the time of the massacre, many judges on the Supreme Court in Oklahoma, some of them belonged to the Klan, you know, and all of this atmosphere, so that we could not have gotten, even if, okay, in law you can say, even if the people who were attacked, the survivors of the massacre had known, you have to make that argument, even if they had known of their rights and of the collusion and involvement of the city of Tulsa, because we have very strong documentation on that. But even if they had known, it would have been ridiculous for them to spend all the energy that they would have had to spend to bring a lawsuit to be faced with a bench that was full of KKK members, right? So that was his argument. He pulled out of our legal argument. I'm not saying none of us knew about equity and equitable tolling, but he pulled it together, right? The judge, and Charles cringes, we have to hold Charles in our hearts, because many of us know he is struggling at the very end stages of, when I say end, I mean he's about to die, but the very end stages of Alzheimer's. Sometimes he doesn't even know who he is or his family, right? So he does not remember us, okay? He does not remember all the fabulous work that he did on these issues. So we have to lift him up in our hearts as we lift up others. But the Charles cringes, some of y'all know me in my mouth. Charles cringes when I've been on panels after we lost the case and said we lost it because of a racist judge. Because the judge decided, yes, you're right. It would have been impossible to get any kind of successful result, any chance of a successful judge, given the way the courts were set up. But he, instead of what we had proposed, which was the statute starts tolling when a popular book on the Tulsa massacre, I think it was by Gates, a Black woman who had written it, that kind of revealed popularly the involvement of the city. He went to a book by Ellsworth, who, not putting Ellsworth down by any means, but was very scholarly work. It wasn't a popular piece that you or I might have read it, or you may have read it, some of you who are scholars, but the ordinary person would not have read that book, would not have known about that book. So how would that have alerted them? But he said that should have alerted our clients that they had a claim. And so I believe it's racist. I believe it's a way in which the system works under the guise of fairness. See, some of the cases, there's no guise of fairness. We know right from the get, it's not fair, right? But in this instance, here we are in the guise of fairness. The judge agrees with us, but then the judge, out of his own, and probably one of his interns, I'm not saying he did it on his own thinking, pulled an insignificant book at that time to the people, to the community, and put it there. So that's why we lost it. We know there's a case now. I'm no longer on the legal team. I was initially on the legal team of a case now that was filed in 2000 on reparations. And we developed at this point a argument, which I was involved in developing, in fact, the argument that that they in fact have benefited and that it is unjust enrichment that the city is gaining at the cost to those who are the survivors and images of those who were not survivors. I don't know, Rashawn, if you have anything else or.
That was it.